Thank you, everyone. I know the mealybug is really at the front of everyone's mind, particularly in this area. This was kind of ground zero. Uh, as the name implies, the pasture mealybug has previously only been really noted as a pest in pasture. And in those systems, they can do things like cut it as a management strategy. But the problem is very new to sugarcane, and we're figuring it out as fast as we can, but there's no real playbook for us to really pull from in terms of implementing management strategies. So I'll tell you about some of the activities we've been doing, some of the biology of the insect that we know from studies in Australia. So I've been working closely on this project with my whole team, but particularly Skylar Thibodeau, who's here with me today. She's a new IPM extension agent based out of the sugar station, who's worked very closely with me on this project. So mealybugs themselves are not new to sugarcane. If you were at the field portion of the tour, I passed around the sugarcane mealybug that's been infesting sugarcane here for decades. But the pasture mealybug is a new pest because it's turning into a major pest for us, while all other mealybugs that infest cane around the world are not really considered economic pests. Same with our sugarcane mealybug here. They're pretty easy to distinguish once you know what to look for. The easiest thing to find is the feeding sites. We see pasture mealybug on the underside of leaves and on the ground and in the soil. The sugarcane mealybug is almost always found feeding behind that leaf sheath. So when we check for borers and we're pulling back those leaf sheaths, they feed directly on the stalk. We've also seen them, they're quite a bit bigger and they have a more pinkish hue. So the pasture mealybug, the nymphs are real small, and even the adults are just a little bigger than an aphid. The sugarcane mealybug is quite a bit bigger. Some of the adults are about the size of a small roly-poly. And they don't produce quite as much sprawling hairs. This is about the biology of the pasture mealybug. So it's a kind of a unique creature, even though among mealybugs. The nymphs feed mainly on the leaves and on the roots. We're still learning more about how much root feeding goes on. They're much more mobile than other mealybugs. A lot of mealybugs are similar to scale insects, and they're almost attached to the feeding sites. These are pretty mobile. You can often see them crawling around on the underside of leaves and crawling up the plant from the soil surface. The adult females look just like big versions of the nymphs. The males, as adults, look almost totally different. They have wings and can fly to find new reproductive partners. That has implications as related to how it's spreading, because if only the males can fly, the females can't fly to new fields and lay eggs. I think they're still going to find plenty of ways that they can get around, but it may be important to slow the spread into some of these new fields. We think they overwinter in the soil. I don't think they're going to have any issues overwintering here. Some of the native range includes parts of Pakistan, which is very cold and mountainous. So I think they ought to be pretty cold hardy, especially down in the soil. And we think the life cycle is about 30 to 40 days. There is no egg stage. The females produce live nymphs, and they pretty quickly move up the plant and start feeding. What do we know about this insect in its native range? It was initially described from sugarcane in Australia, or from pasture grasses in Australia. It was also described from sugarcane in Pakistan, and it's been in those areas for decades, over 100 years actually, and never really developed into a major pest of sugarcane. They grow sugarcane throughout its native range. It arrived in the New World, in our hemisphere, first in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and Barbados. They also produce sugarcane in those places, but it's only been reported from pasture there. We think it arrived in Texas about 2022. They didn't detect it and determine it was a new species until last year, 2025, but there's some evidence that it was there earlier. And I even saw some photos that in 2022, I think it was infesting sugarcane down in the Rio Grande Valley, but it kind of went unnoticed because the industry was on its way out by that point. We don't really know the mode of introduction or the mode of spread. That's just anybody's guess at this point. It's very small and easily can hitchhike on equipment or plant materials, so very likely that's the source, but it could also, it's small enough that it can be blown in the wind, I would guess. The first observations here in the US were from Texas in 2025. They found it fairly early in the summer when it was causing a lot of pasture dieback, and pretty quickly they realized the problem was widespread. They were the first ones to get it identified as a new mealybug species that's new to the US. It was also noted in a couple of sugarcane fields in Mexico. They're dealing with it now as well. And here we found it in just a handful of farms right around in this area, both in Vermilion and in Iberia parishes. Those fields, you probably saw pictures of it last year. Where we found it were severely impacted. It wasn't a huge number of acres, but the acres that were infested saw a substantial drop, both in tonnage and in particularly in sugar recovery, where they had TRSs below 100. This was really the worst affected field. You can see that yellowing is all the way through the canopy. It was later in the year than it is now when we saw these symptoms, or at least when it became this severe. So we know there is potential for heavy infestations and heavy yellowing, but last year we didn't see it on a large number of acres. This year we know it's much more widespread. First detected in May in that same farm where we had the highest infestations in 2025. It's also now moved into Florida. It's affecting both pasture grasses and the sugarcane industry there. We're having meetings with the scientists and discussing how they're addressing the issue weekly. And it's also moved into Central America, so there's people working on it now in Mexico, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Certainly I don't like to see problems and adversity spread to new areas, but I am glad to see there's going to be more people working on this. We're not alone with this problem. So it's really spread to a lot of new areas in 2026. This map has been changing pretty well weekly since the May detections, and you may have seen some other ones I've sent out where we had parishes that were confirmed by USDA APHIS versus those that were confirmed either by myself or through good photo evidence. APHIS has been a little slow making those official confirmations, but a lot of these infestations I laid eyes on myself or have a good picture from a consultant there checking every acre. And so I'm highly confident it is established in these parishes. And one thing I want to point out is we had credible reports, and they saw yellowing and sugarcane drops in the 4 yellow parishes here. And this already is a pretty broad general area. So I think very likely, even last year, the sugarcane mealybug was pretty widespread. It just didn't really emerge in sugarcane in high numbers in that many areas. And that's what I think we're seeing this year as well. We're not seeing it necessarily spread into new parishes, but it just is emerging later in the year and being detected later. So I think very likely its distribution in Louisiana is even wider than this, but I would anticipate it'll be detected in some of the last remaining sugarcane producing parishes soon in the next couple weeks. Most recently we added Lafourche. We're seeing some heavy infestations but not on a lot of acres. This is the worst field. This is where I put out my test. You've probably seen it. It's near Freyu Road, right off of Highway 90. It is really heavily infested. You've got really high numbers of insects. If you can't see the individuals, but we're counting as high as 300 and 400 a leaf, and the whole canopy is impacted. There's hardly any green left in that field. That is the most severe case we've seen. That's more like the exception than the rule. Most of the crop, even around here where the pest is pretty widespread, still looks to be like a healthy crop and is growing and moving as we'd expect. The few fields we're following where they've sprayed and unsprayed, we haven't seen the deterioration in those unsprayed plots, anything like this. They still look to be moving fine. They've got a few yellow leaves, but certainly this field near New Iberia is like the the Kaplan field. It serves as a warning on how bad these infestations can get, but I think overall the crop we have out there is still looking pretty good. The mealybugs themselves are small and can be really difficult to detect, especially if they're present in really low numbers. We took some microscope shots. This is Skylar's work, and they're teeny tiny. So the smallest ones we measured were 0.2 of a millimeter. So if you imagine the smallest marks on a ruler, you can line up 5 of them between that 1 millimeter distance. The older nymphs and adults, they get more hairy as they get older, and you can see the size jump from the real small ones. This is about the size of a big aphid, easily seen with the naked eye, and pretty recognizable. So the hairier and larger ones are the older, more mature stages. This is very likely a mature female. They're close to about 2 millimeters. This is the easiest thing to spot, though, is the yellowing leaves. So you can kind of look, I'm sure all of you have looked at enough sugarcane, you can see where the leaves are normally senescent and when a leaf is supposed to be green. Some of these lower to mid-level canopy, they're turning yellow, in some cases almost like a lemon yellow. So you can see it from the pickup truck. You don't have to really get out and look around too hard. Often you can turn those yellow leaves over and find a little small pasture mealybug. They appear to be causing symptomology or yellowing leaves at pretty low densities. A lot of times we'll see just 1 or 2 nymphs on that leaf. We're trying to examine more to see what the relationship is between potential underground root feeding and leaf feeding on producing these symptomology. But if you see yellow leaves out there, continue looking to confirm the presence of the insect. Right now, there's a lot of yellow sugarcane aphid infestations, and they'll also cause the leaves to change color. So just be aware of that and look for the insect itself on these leaves. Another kind of lookalike that I've been getting a lot of pictures of as people are looking for the pasture mealybug on edge is this mealybug destroyer. So this is actually a beneficial predator. It intentionally looks like a mealybug because it's a mimic that uses that as a disguise to kind of cruise around within mealybug infested plants and gobble up all the mealybugs. It also eats aphids and whiteflies. So with the aphids that are out in the fields now, we see a lot of mealybug destroyer. It's quite a bit bigger and faster. Some of the smaller larvae are comparable in size, but you'll also see some bigger ones. And the best way I've been able to describe this is if the mealybug has hair, then these pasture mealybugs have like dreadlocks. It's more defined and larger strands. So I'll just point out this picture again. You can see it looks almost like a sprawling web. The outer covering of these is much more defined and kind of thicker strings here. We've got a lot of people working on this now. We work together with the league and with Hannah and her group at USDA. We know there's a lot more questions to answer than answers at this point, but really these are my priorities. We need to get a better idea of the relationship between insect densities, leaf yellowing, and yield loss. That's going to be the most important question guiding management decisions in future years. And that's why I'm trying to look at some of these untreated strips. So please consider doing that. If you're going to treat the whole farm, leave me a little spot to put some trials out, and we can take surveys and try to better get at that information. Also, obviously, we need to know what works. Insecticidal efficacy studies, that's really been a big part of the focus now. That not only provides us with helpful information we can deliver to the growers, but that data is necessary to include in potential packages that go to EPA to try to get us new registrations. Varietal work is going to be a component we hope to explore. I've done a lot of work on a lot of different insects, and almost always you see a difference among varieties. We've seen it in all our commercial varieties so far, so there's nothing that really stands out as having some resistance, but if it will get in some of the outfield tests and we pick it up there, we can collect replicated data and make some direct comparisons between the varieties. And we need to look at sampling strategies. As I mentioned, there's a lot of evidence they're feeding on the roots, but we need a way to better document that in a way we can do it quickly and efficiently. So one of the things Skylar's going to explore with the nematologist this week is he's got a dye you can use, and you can actually see puncture marks on roots that nematodes cause. I think there's a good chance we can use the same process to document feeding on the roots. We know that you can often find the pasture mealybug in the soil, but it's difficult to determine if those are all feeding on the roots or if they're just reproducing down there and the nymphs are climbing up to feed on the leaves. So those are things we hope to explore in the immediate future. We're also communicating a lot with entomologists in Florida and other folks working on this. So together, we're going to try to put together a robust research effort and answer some of these questions while we have the opportunities this year. With that, I'll just acknowledge all the folks that worked on this with me. It's very much a cooperative effort. We're working closely with the consultants. They've been extremely important in reporting the new detections in parishes, as well as helping us find good experimental sites and putting out insecticide tests. We've also communicated a lot with Dr. David Kearns. He's working on this insect in pasture in Texas, and I've been in communication with some scientists over in Australia that have been working on this insect for a lot longer than we have as well. So we're trying to tap into every potential resource and source of information and try to address this problem. So,
Dr. Penn, local consultant, Dr. Blaine Viator, has a video, I think, and a few things he wanted to discuss on the pasture mealybug as well.
Thank you, Blair. Look, Blair asked me just to come in out the field a few minutes just to give you an update of what's going on right now. All the consultants, I mean, we have a really good text group that goes, we exchange information pretty much multiple times a day trying to keep up with this thing. Look, this pest, I've never seen anything like it. It's going to be a very, very, very difficult pest to scout and manage for. I kind of call it the invisible pest because, you know, Hannah and I were discussing this earlier. There's times when you can walk in a field and you'll find the nymphs, or you might find the adult females. You can go in 2 days later, you won't find one. And the cane is just yellower than it was before. We're really, the only thing consultants can do at this point is scout the symptoms. Yes, we can find some adult females, but once they're done laying their eggs, you don't see them anymore. And those are the ones Blake showed that were a little larger, easier to see. And of course, he showed that there's some nymphs in there that are 0.2 of a millimeter. And one of the biggest concerns we have is a lot of these insects' growth stage is underground. Okay, so imagine trying to find an insect that's 0.2 of a millimeter in a shovel full of soil. Right? So very difficult to manage. Going back in a little bit of the timeline here, Blake had mentioned this earlier. We had to rely on limited Texas A&M data for pasture. Right now in our heaviest hit areas, we have fields on their third applications, okay? And I will say it's kind of frustrating. We are seeing improvement, we're holding them back, but we're not shutting them down, okay? This is with aerial applications. We're hoping after a couple of applications, we can break this life cycle. One of the things you saw the entomologist talking about is we're trying to find another chemistry to take this. Growth regulators, other chemistries that we can try to do something to help break this life cycle. We're trying to avoid having to do repeated aerial applications every 2 to 3 weeks all the way till October. One of the points I just want to pass on too, it was mentioned earlier, there is a lot of low to moderate aphid pressure out there. And you will see yellowing on the lower canopy from aphids. Now, I can recognize the difference quickly. Pasture mealybug yellowing is a very distinctive type compared to a sugarcane aphid, but for most people, it's difficult to see. There is a lot of yellow sugarcane aphid pressure out there, so don't be alarmed if you do see yellow leaves and just automatically panic and assume you have pasture mealybug. Another thing, a lot of calls I get is from heavy brown stripe in 299. I mean, you'll look at the bottoms and you'll say, oh my goodness, but a lot of it's just brown stripe disease. So that's all I have. I think the big thing is, look, Sunday morning I was out, we put out a helicopter trial. What we're trying to do, look, the scientists, the league, all the consultants, there's the industry members, we have a weekly call every Wednesday evening, trying to get everybody updated on what's going on, how many acres of spray, what's working, what's not, what's the latest research. I'll say the communication has been really impressive and a lot of things are moving. But what we're asking everybody is to be patient. I'll say this especially for the pilots. I was putting out a test. What I'm trying to do is I know what all the scientists are looking at, the chemistries they're looking at. What we're trying to do in consultants, not just me, all the consultants, we're also looking at some other chemistries that haven't been looked at yet that do have some activity on other mealybug species. We're trying to find something, and everybody's working together on it. Just be patient with your pilots. Those guys are exhausted right now. I am literally, exhausted. And the consultants are too, okay? So just understand that it's a lot of long hours and a lot of tired and sleepless nights going through this thing. So with that, I'm gonna finish up. Now look, I'm apologizing in advance. The video quality is terrible. I've been trying to get a good quality version of this video for 6 days now. But I wanted to show you this. This is actually was sent to me from a nutrient rep in Florida. And just watch this.
Yeah, I'm videoing too.
Yeah, it was poor quality, but actually those were sent in. They were confirmed pasture mealybug. So look, you got to understand too, not just from the consultants, from a research side. The entomologists are beautiful. You know, to be able to collect good data is very intensive work, especially when you have what I call a hidden pest. So just understand everybody's working hard on it. We hope we're going to have a lot of answers by the end of the season. And I know the way our industry is, the farmers are going to figure out a lot of things to help us. So anyway, thank you.